question, which you can't see, is what is landscape photography? And this is my question to you guys. I want someone to answer. What do you think is the definition of landscape photography?
Nature, outside, often has flora and maybe some fauna.
Okay, well, I went to Uncle Google because I know what I think of as landscape. But landscape photography shows the spaces within the world, sometimes vast and unending, but other times it can be microscopic, or I don't think of it necessarily as microscopic, but maybe a more intimate vignette but lots of times people think of landscapes as vistas, as big, big pictures instead of like focusing in on one flower. You're like in this case, it's this whole garden that's in this wooded area, and I'm pretty sure that's Mount Cuba in Delaware. So landscape photographer takes photos of people think landscape is also the aspect, but you can have a landscape photo that is in portrait aspect as well. So it's not just that it's always wide. You can use your camera to capture a natural scene or an image of the world around you. These are all Google definitions. And landscape photography typically captures the presence of nature, like you said, but can also focus on human man-made features or disturbances of the landscapes. So that's something to think about. Okay, and next slide. So this should say the elements of landscape photography, so pretend that says that up there. And the first element is light. Well, obviously, good lighting is essential for all photography, but especially true for landscape and nature photography. It doesn't matter how beautiful the location is, if you're trying to photograph it in bad lighting conditions, the results are not going to be great. And amazing lighting can turn even an average scene into a beautiful photograph. This happens to be the trolley trail down in Catonsville, and I just love the way the light was shining down on this one portion of the trail. And so, how many people know what are the best times of the day to shoot landscape?
Early morning or late afternoon.
Okay.
Just before sunset and just after sunrise.
Okay. Go ahead and hit the next one. So your first one. Now see, the word shows up there. your first time is going to be blue hour, and blue hour is an hour before sunrise, but an hour after sunset. I have another question for you. How do you know the difference between an amateur and a professional photographer shooting a sunset?
Probably a professional doesn't. You don't see the sun.
Actually, an amateur packs up the gear, the sun's gone down below the horizon, the amateur takes their gear and goes home. The professional stays for blue hour because your images, the time of day is better because the colors are more saturated. This is not me saturating it. This is truly what the scene looked like. This is up in Haverty Grace. Fabulous place for sunrises, by the way, if you ever want to do sunrises. I know a lot of you don't get up as early as I do, but Haverty Grace is great for sunrises, and the clouds definitely make it. But the colors are more deeper, they're vivid, they're saturated in blue hour.
Is that flash enhanced?
No, actually, that's lighting from this is off of the promenade area, it's right in Concord Point, and there's street lights there, and that's what is lighting up the old pier. There is actually a street light behind me. So it was no flash, just long exposure. All right.
I guess I was confused about what is a landscape photo. Both of the ones you showed us have man-made things in them.
Yeah.
And I kind of got the impression that landscape was these wide open vistas of nature and such.
That's one definition. It can include, you got the clouds, which are not man-made. You got the water, which is not man-made, but it can include elements that are man-made. And you'll see a couple of my other ones in here that definitely include that. But in my book, they come under landscape. So,
Okay.
All right, next one. like this. This is the Amtrak train bridge in Havre de Grace. And yes, I'm up in Havre de Grace a lot. And this was a long exposure, and it was the Excella train, and I actually got her streaking. You'll see that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah. But again, the point being is this is kind of blue hour. The sun really hasn't risen above the horizon point yet. And so the colors are going to be more vivid and more saturated. So, and then the next one, the next good time is golden hour, and it's aptly named. Actually, both are. You know, blue hour things, the blues tend to be bluer. Golden hour things tend to be redder, more golden color. This is actually down in Baltimore, shooting towards the Underhammer in the distance, and I was up on Federal Hill, and just like the steam being accented by the light. So golden hour is an hour after sunrise and an hour before sunset. So, are those the only good times of the day to shoot for landscape?
Nope.
Probably the best, but
They are the best, yes. Go ahead, hit the next one. That's another golden hour shot. This was down at Fort Armistead before the Key Bridge fell.
Mm,
Yeah, and but the sun was already up, and the colors are starting to desaturate a little, but they're still pretty.
nice to see the foreground and background elements of that.
Yeah. I love that puddle, but I didn't realize it when I took the picture that it must have had like an oily sheen on it, and I didn't like the red and greeny, oily, purpley color that was on. It was like ruining my reflection. So I totally desaturated the color and decided, well, I'm going to make that black and white, just to be a little different. So next one, please. Okay. Well, actually, overcast days can be your best friend for a landscape photographer. I hate bluebird days. Bluebird days, kind of like today, although I'm starting to see some clouds. But at one point when I went out to the doctor's office, I was like, oh my gosh, we started with fog this morning, which was absolutely fantastic. And then I come outside and it was absolutely clear blue sky. I will tell you a trick though, if you have a clear bluebird day and you want to do photography outside, reflections are really great on bluebird days. Because you don't...
As long as there's no wind.
Yes, this is true. Good point. But overcast days can be quite beneficial to you. You're not going to want to get as much sky in, obviously, because unless there's definition in the clouds. But the nice thing about overcast days is that it's like a softbox. Your light is diffused. Your big light source, the sun, is now spread out wider, and it's not harsh and sharp. So it can make things look a lot nicer. This is also up at Mount Cuba in Delaware. Okay, next one. And that's a Loch Raven. And I liked, you can't really tell even though you can see some of the blue, but it was really interesting. We were hiking around there, and a lot of this was really in shadow, but just this little piece of the shoreline, the sun was highlighting that, and I really, and I liked the light showing up there. But if that had been a completely blue day, I wouldn't have gotten that, or if it had been completely overcast, I wouldn't have gotten that. So to make the best of what she gets. Okay, next one. And again, wording would have said element of landscape photography, composition. So as with all types of photography, composition of your subject is key. We'll go over several of the different guidelines that you can use in your landscape photos to take them to the next level. But my photography mentor once told me, he says, your job is to make the subject the hero. How do you make that heroic? So, or how do you tell that story of that photograph? So how you choose to do that is helped by composing the photo.
So is that considered landscape right there?
That probably not, but I liked it for the light. That's me. It's not macro
Okay,
either.
that's right.
It's just it's down at Kenilworth Aquatic Gardens.
So Beth, when you have I'll call it a pastoral scene
Mhm.
with, pastures and nothing really that would jump out as a subject, is that a worthy picture to, to capture, or?
Well, it depends. I mean, you could compose it. There may be like, oh, perfect example. I was just recently up at Winterthur, and I went through the house and went through the gardens, and I came out. They have this big field area and this pond. Granted, there was a boathouse kind of thing in it, which is what my subject was. But if you were looking at the grasses, and it was one of those days where the light kept coming and going, so it was really kind of cool. So parts of it were lit and parts weren't. You could compose it so that the light could be like a leading line, and we're going to talk about that in a second. But it just depends on how you go about it to make it. If it's lacking a subject, find something and then use one of your compositional skills to make it stand out a little bit more. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I guess, when we get to the point where we go through some of the photos, I've got some that come to mind that there really wasn't a clear subject in there, but it was certainly a landscape scene with all the textures and the farmland and so on.
Well, I think once we go through some of the compositional things that you can take going forward, it might help you go the next time you see something like that, go, okay, that's pretty, but how do I make it the hero? How do I take it to that next level? How do I find something? And that's a matter of using different compositional techniques and perspective to help you change. Because I remember when I first started, be like, oh my gosh, I'd come across someplace and I was so excited and it was so wonderful, and I take pictures and I get home and I'm going,
Yep.
yeah,
Exactly.
So yes, one thing I've learned, and I don't do anything easy. Landscape photography is probably one of the hardest ones to get, because it's trying to take like chaos and bring it down to like something that's easy to see as the subject. But I learned to take my time, which was so hard for me because I'm impatient. So I keep finding things in life that keep trying to teach me patience, and landscape photography was one of them. So
Obviously, you're not out there with my wife.
oh, she takes her time, is what you're telling me, or no?
No.
Oh, no.
No.
Oh, okay.
No time.
Okay, she's snapshotting. So, okay. Well, one of the compositional rules or guidelines I prefer instead of rules, if you hit the next screen,
Is leave your spouse at home.
well, there's that. Yes. Oh, I do not take my husband, because even though he used to do some photography, he is Mr. Destination and I'm Miss Journey,
Right.
and it drives him crazy, and then I'm not doing as good because I'm feeling rushed. So yeah.
Yeah.
First rule of thumb, leave the spouse home. Leading lines. So obviously, if you guys are familiar with Ellicott City, you know that is the Ellicott City, Railroad Museum down there. So using the train track as a line to guide your eye or the person's eye through the photo to your subject is a great way of using composition to make it a little bit more heroic or a little different. Go ahead and hit next one. I used this stone wall to lead up to this covered bridge, which is in Pennsylvania. I could have used the road perhaps as well as a way to kind of lead your eye up to that subject. So it makes it makes it stand out a little bit more. And next one. And you can use lots of things like this little waterfall. There's a leading line following you up through, using the rope on the Gloria and using that as the leading line up to the boat, because of the way I took the shot, I was down low, and using that as my leading line to draw your eye up to the main subject, which is the boat. I was leading the Harford County Photography Group through Pennsylvania in Lancaster to some covered bridges, and one of our members was there he was using the leading line of the the yellow double line in the road, and I'm like, well, I'm going to get a shot of Keith doing this. So, also the funny thing is the way he had his head down, he looks like he's the headless photographer. So that's what I've called this, is the headless photographer.
And is that a star filter on the sun?
Nope, that's just a probably f/16 or f/22
Oh,
aperture to get the sunburst, and looks like lots of dust on my lens. But I kind of like the effect. So
I thought of that guy as the one painting
Yeah,
the
that's right.
Yeah,
lines.
that's what I was thinking.
Oh,
The
yeah.
line doesn't
That's
exist
a
behind
long
them.
time.
yeah, that's
And it's
what I
weird
thought.
because there is this big gap, and I don't know if it's because it was a driveway. I don't think it was an intersection there, because actually the bridge is behind us at this point. But I just had to take this shot of Keith, and I kind of liked it, so it was neat. So next one. Okay, another compositional guideline you can use is framing. So using the trees and the foliage to frame so that the fountain is your subject, and it kind of draws your attention. You also can see a little bit of a leading line with the lighter color on the brickwork there, also helps. But and this is at Ladue, Topiary Gardens, and I actually took this shot again, but now with the rhododendron in bloom, and it looks a little bit different. So framing is really great. It's been one thing I've been playing with a lot more lately. And hit the shot again. And here we go with me and Haverty Grace. That's Concord Point Lighthouse. I'd like to shoot it between the trees that are there. And then the one on the right is from Brighton Dam Azalea Garden. So using kind of the blurry foreground is actually more azaleas, but it focuses and brings your attention to the azalea. It's kind of more in the mid-range.
Would that be a fairly small f-stop on that picture as well?
Yes, I probably did, I would say maybe an f/5.6. I don't remember off the top of my head, but yeah, I did that on purpose so that the foreground was blurred. My focal point is midway. And obviously you can see that the background is not in focus either. It's more of a, not quite bokeh, but a blurred effect.
Does everybody know what bokeh is?
Do not know that term.
Bokeh is a Japanese term, actually. And I don't know that I have, the next one might have an example. It's when you use a shallow depth of field, and you can have a creamy bokeh. The background this would be, I guess, kind of considered creamy bokeh. Or if you've seen like the hexagonal or circular dots in the back, that is also considered bokeh, and that's one of the things that a lot of landscape people love is bokeh. And what I love about one of my lenses is I have the ability to control the bokeh. I have an actual ring. It's an SA ring. It's a spherical something, I don't know what the A stands for, ring on my lens that actually allows me to either make it a sharper bokeh or a creamier bokeh. Yeah. That's my macro lens. I love that lens.
So
It's like
that
an
the
F.
one on the left,
Mm-hmm.
the lighthouse,
Mm-hmm.
so the trees look like they're fairly sharp, and the lighthouse and the flag are sharp,
Mm-hmm.
long distance. So is that an f/8 or an f/10 or something like that? And was it on a tripod as you stopped it down?
Actually the trees don't look, at least the ones in the front, those are paper maples or
That's
paper.
the side of the lighthouse, right?
I'm sorry.
That's the side of the lighthouse?
Yes.
Yeah. That's what I thought.
They don't look as sharp, but I was probably, my focal point would have been the lighthouse.
Right.
I honestly, I don't go much lower than f/8 if I'm doing landscape.
Okay.
It would have probably been maybe an f/11 or even f/16. Sorry, I don't have that memorized. I took this a while ago.
No, but that answers my question, because everything I shot was mostly between 8 and 13, I think.
Okay, well, we're gonna talk about f-stop in a bit too, so. And it also depends on where you're focusing. If I had done maybe I doubt it's an f/16, because if I did an f/16, I would have thought that the trees in the front would be more in focus, because f/16 definitely tries to get front to back. So that might have been an F8 and just focused on the lighthouse so that it was more the star, and I wasn't concerned about the front. I mean, you can tell what the front is, but it didn't have to be sharp
Mhm.
because the subject was the lighthouse.
I would guess that for the picture on the right,
Mm-hmm.
the white blobs
Or azaleas.
are azaleas, but they're quite close
mm-hmm,
to where you are.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's going to throw them further out of focus.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas on the left, those trees are much further away from your lens relative to
Right, relative
the other
to
one.
the other one, you're right, definitely. And to answer your question about the tripod, that's why I brought some of my gear just to kind of go over a little bit of that. Yeah, landscape photographers definitely need to learn to like the tripod, and it took me a while, because I felt it was very restrictive. But it makes for better photos, and especially when you're doing low light conditions like blue hour, you definitely need a tripod. And I think somebody was looking out for me the other day because I went up to Havre de Grace to see the Pride of Baltimore go out. I got her coming into Havre de Grace on Friday, but she was leaving Monday morning, and I had thought I was so smart and I had everything all packed, and I get on the road and I'm like, I forgot my foot from my tripod. So, well, when I got up there, it was 100% cloud cover. It looked like the world's worst background, so I wound up not staying very long, and I didn't need the tripod. But yeah, tripod I use quite often with landscape work. Okay.
And it's very nice to have a tripod equipped for a shoe, which is on your camera, rather than a thumb screw that you
Right,
always
right.
have to turn it to get it on.
And I'll show you some of the gear that I use when I'm done with all of this. Just, I mean, again, some of it is like really cheap, like $5 on Amazon kind of thing, and some of it's not. But it's definitely affordable enough for anybody if they want to kind of take their photography to the next level to get some of this stuff.
So this is a base to which the shoe kind of snaps in, so there's no thumb screwing?
Yeah, I'll show you in this.
Okay.
I actually have something that's called Small Rig. It's the company,
Mhm.
and it goes on my camera, and it has the shoe built in. But the nice thing about it is I don't have to take the camera off to do this, to go to portrait. You just rotate.
Ah.
It stays on, and it stays still, and it stays level and everything. And my next big thing, keep waiting because I did this through Kickstarter, is I'm getting a self-leveling tripod. So it comes with these little module things, and then you just press the button, and like one of the legs will go, and the other leg. So you're not sitting there going, oh, that's not level yet. So,
Can't wait till that breaks.
yeah. Oh, let me get it first. Okay, next slide. A couple more instances of framing. Again, using the trees. Trees are really great. You can also use things like a trellis, say it at Ledoux, a trellis to frame something, or a gate, like a big gate like they have in the Rose Garden at Ledoux. There's a gate there. You can use man-made. It doesn't have to necessarily be nature. I could have, if there was something interesting at the far end of that covered bridge, I could have used the outside of the bridge as a frame, and then maybe I was shooting through it and there was somebody standing at the end, or like I've taken my husband, well, he's driven it, his Morgan Plus 8 I've shot up at Roddy Creek in Frederick County, the covered bridge that's up there. So if I was shooting through the covered bridge, I could use the covered bridge as the frame with his car at the end, like coming through the covered bridge. So just a couple of examples. Okay, next one. And this one is probably one. So you see, okay, yeah. So see the circles in the back, how they're kind of circles. That would be bokeh.
Okay.
So one that I know you guys probably all know is rules of third, which is a very common one to use. And you're going to want to put your subject, although my bee is just slightly off, I was kind of going more for the flower to be there, but if you put it at one of those intersection points where the lines meet, sometimes it'll look good on the left. I suggest take it both ways, because sometimes it's really weird. Like I don't know why, but sometimes I'll gravitate more towards putting it on the left side intersection versus the right side, or maybe you do always do the top intersection. Well, try the bottom ones, you know, just to give yourself a different look. Like take 4 or 5 photos. One is the top left intersection, one is the top right intersection, one's the bottom right, one's the bottom left, and see what works. Because sometimes, and I can't tell you why something would work better one way or another, it's just a feeling, or it's just a matter of preference. So what you like and what.
That's a great idea. I try to use that. Take one picture and then I come back and try to crop it, and then I say, oh man, now I'm losing this part of
Right.
the photo. And
I'm like, I could always do generative fill in Photoshop, but you know, while you're there, take, you know, especially because we're all using digital. Nobody's shooting on film, right? Okay, so you got plenty of space. So I could have composed this where the bee and the flower was on the right side. I don't think it would have worked, especially with the bee. Maybe if I was just doing the flower and the bee had been on the front, I could have done it on the right. But I think if I had put him too far over to the left, it would have had no space on the right side of the bee, if that makes sense.
good idea, thanks.
And the rule of thirds is really a compositional suggestion.
Guideline, yes.
So it would say to you, well, kind of on that third goes the plant. So, you know, and a suggestion, just like a stop sign is a suggestion.
No.
No?
Yield is a suggestion.
Oh, I see.
Stop signs are suggestions.
You sound like my husband. That's an advisory. No.
Does everybody have their viewfinder set so
For
that
the
you
grid
see
pattern.
those lines, those grids?
Yeah,
I don't think so.
I always do.
Easy to do, it helps.
Yeah.
Our-
Check.
our-
I would
our
be
camera
surpri-
doesn't do that.
That's-
Really?
What do you
I
have?
don't think so.
What do you have? What do you shoot?
Pentax
Okay.
K3.
Yeah,
I
look,
don't know that.
I'd look.
I'd look. Go through
Not
your
through the
menu.
viewfinder, but maybe on the screen on the
Yeah,
back.
Huh.
yeah,
Hmm.
definitely not on
Yeah.
the view.
Yeah, on the eyepiece, on mine, I have it on my screen, but not on the eyepiece, it doesn't show.
Check your settings though. I would be, especially if it's somewhat like newer, like in the last 10 years newer. I would think it would be there, if not
We
more.
should be able to do that.
Yeah. Check your settings or Google your camera and grid lines and see what comes up, because it can be very helpful. It's also very helpful for something else we're going to talk about in a couple of seconds. So, but okay, next one, I got another example. Sunflower. Again, I put him down at the bottom left intersection of the lines. I don't know if you guys can really see those lines, but they're there. Yeah. And okay, and then one more example.
Next.
Yes. Haverty Grace again.
Same lighthouse.
Same lighthouse, but from a different perspective, and I love the purpley pinky colors. And this was actually a sunrise. You can get somewhat of a sunset up there, but it's not always. It's kind of a crapshoot, but they're better for their sunrises in Haverty Grace than.
So with your exposure on this,
Mm-hmm.
is this manual as opposed to automatic exposure?
I only shoot manual. I only shoot in RAW and I only shoot in manual. With one exception, when I'm doing birding, then I do shutter priority.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So you might almost start with automatic for some things, and you look at this and say, well, on the back of the screen, it doesn't look like that. Maybe it's overexposed, underexposed. It's very easy to fool your exposure meter
Yeah, like
on that.
also the shot that I have from the Baltimore sunrise. If I had gone by what the camera wanted me to expose for, I would not have gotten that shot.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons I like to shoot manual, because I get to tell it what I want. You know, if I want to underexpose, if I want a silhouette, if I want, you know, it lighter and airy, which doesn't tend to be my style.
And you'll bracket it, you'll take a number of them?
Sometimes
Plus
I
and
do. I did some stuff up at Winterthur the other day, and I definitely did some bracketing of it, and then I came back and did it as an HDR because it was one of those days where it was really dark, but the sky was light, and I was going to blow out. If I just left it with one, you know, on that 0 mark, I was going to blow up my highlights in my sky. But the picture I was taking in the foreground was going to be too dark, so definitely did several exposures and then merged them into one so that you get the right.
It's beautiful.
Thank you.
It's a beautiful
So
map.
my camera, I was doing some live
Uh-huh.
view
Uh-huh.
where you can see the histogram
Yeah.
and you can play with the
Exposures.
exposure.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
It's
I-
always good to use your histogram so you don't clip.
I was just messing around with it because, you know, I'm not that experienced actually doing this kind of stuff, so. Yeah, it was pretty interesting.
Yeah, and I like, because I have it, I can see it through the viewfinder, but also on the back of my LCD screen. And I can tell whether I'm going to be crushing blacks or clipping my whites by using the histogram.
So it's showing you the color range, and you're looking for places where you're spiking off the graph by blowing out part of the spectrum.
Yeah,
that
if
what's
you
going on?
if you're too overexposed and your highlights get blown out, everybody know what blinkies are? Does everybody have blinkies on their cameras? Okay, so that's you know that's one way of finding out that you've done it wrong. You know, is if it's blinking after you've taken the picture. But by using the histogram, you can see if it goes too far over to the right and it starts to spike up that far right side. That's what they call clipping your highlights. And if it's too far over here on the left side and that's your blacks, and that's when they crush your blacks, when there's no detail in the blacks, and if you blow out your highlights, there's no detail in the whites. So you want to kind of avoid that. You want a nice, ideally you want like a bell curve, but you know, I think I rarely get a bell curve exactly the way I want it. So, okay, next, and then. It's supposed to say focus front to back. This, believe it or not, is the Susquehanna River. This was during our drought last year. All that rock should be underwater, but I really liked it. I thought it was kind of alien landscape, and I love the fall colors. This is further up. This is, I think it may be past Conowingo.
Yeah, it's gotta be, that's not.
Yeah. It might be, or it might be below Conowingo.
Oh, yeah, I guess the
I'm
other end.
trying to remember. I don't think it's Lepidium, which has got a boat ramp, which has got a cool area. But anyway, it's the Susquehanna River. Landscape tends to be focused is from the front to the back. So you're going to be using an aperture that the least you would do is f8. I usually shoot an f16, like something like this. It depends on your lens also. Where's the sweet spot on your lens? What's going to work best for you? But definitely f8, f11, f13. If it's a really bright sunny day and you absolutely have to shoot, everybody know what the sunny 16 rule is? You heard of that? So if it's a bright sunny day, f16 is your aperture that you'd want to set it for. At least you wouldn't go lower than that, because that'll help keep it from being too harsh and too bright. I mean, it won't make it pretty, especially if you're going out like at the midday. But if you're going out and it's sunny and it's not, you know, golden hour or blue hour, and you still want to take, like if you're out traveling and you can't control what time you're going someplace, remember the f16, the sunny 16 rule. If it's really sunny, then at least f16 is your aperture that you want to set it for.
So what is that 100 part of that? Is that part of that? Shooting that up
What-
1/100th of a second and.
Oh,
So-
I'm focusing, for me, I focus mainly on my aperture first, and then I look at, see what my shutter speed is, and I kind of leave my ISO, because I know with denoise software I can have it go up. I mean, if it's really bright, it doesn't matter because it's going to be at 100 anyway from my ISO. But again, it would also depend on my lens. Like my 100 lens, I definitely don't want to shoot below 100 on it. My wide angle lens is a 14 to 35. I can certainly shoot like, 1/30th or 1/20th. It may not be as best, but yeah, I focus on aperture first and then the shutter speed to whether, like in this case, I handheld this because I wasn't going to be able to get the rocks and a tripod to be straight for me. If I'd had it on a tripod, I could have certainly done a lower shutter speed. But as far as handheld, I want a higher shutter speed just to ensure that I don't blur anything.
Beth, on this photo, where did you focus the lens?
If I'm doing like an f/16 or maybe even f/11 or whatever, f/8's kind of iffy, but if f/11 and higher, I will do about a third of the way in. And especially with f/16, if you do that, everything behind it's going to be in focus, and enough in front of it is going to be in focus because of about that third of the way in is where that sweet spot is for like an f/16.
What would be the downside if you focused very close to the front and with f/16?
Probably because of f/16 would probably still get enough of it in focus in the back. It's if you get down to like f/8, then you probably more than likely would not have like the bridge and the trees back there to be in focus as much. They'd be more bokeh-esque. So yeah, it's definitely landscape. Key is getting the right aperture and focusing, like I said, a third of the way into the picture so that you get everything from front to back. And then I have my assistant go to the next, thank you. It's another shot. This is at Ledoux. And just, again, have everything in focus, your foreground, your midground, and your background. And that's another thing about landscape photography is it tends to have those three elements. Sometimes you see something in the middle and oh, that's really great, and you want that to be your subject, but you have to make sure you have a foreground, midground, and background for it to be a good landscape photograph. And I liked the tree and the reflection, and of course all the lines of the contrails from the planes in the sky. So it was a good day at Ledoux. And next. And this is at Sandy Point, sunrise. And this girl, it killed me because it was, this beautiful sunrise, and she's just sitting there writing in her journal or whatever she's doing, which is fine. But I just thought, wow, she's missing all this, the pretty sun coming up and stuff like that.
But it helped to make your image.
Yes, it
Yep.
gave it scale.
The scale.
That's another thing that you'll find. I for the longest time fought having people in my landscape photographs, but they do give you scale. And finally, what clicked for me was I was in Delaware down at the Indian River Inlet, and I don't know if you've ever been there, but it's the Indian River that comes into the Atlantic at that point, and these huge big rocks, and these fishermen get way out on the rocks to fish, the ocean side. And this guy had come past me, and I was here, like back where the sand was, and he came past me, he goes out there, and I'm like, ooh, right in my photo, but I got this great silhouette of him fishing in that photo, and if I didn't have him, it probably would have been a meh photo, but he gave it scale, he gave it a point of interest. Also, there is a big sign, kind of like almost like a buoy, but it's in the rocks at the end of one of the sides of the inlet. And these guys were out there fishing, and the waves were coming in, and they were like holding on. They're holding on to the rod in one hand and holding on to this thing, and I got a couple of good shots of that crashing. And again, it would have been just there's a sign at the end of the rocks, but having those guys be that element in that landscape photo actually made that one much better. So. Okay.
And that girl is in the lower right quadrant
Yep.
of the rule of thirds.
Yep. Definitely. All right, next one. Okay. Well, this should say, check your edges. This is something I have a confession to make. This photograph has been on my business cards. It has been in my calendar 2 years running. Wasn't till this year that I noticed, you see that circle and that branch at the bottom? I'm like, oh my gosh. That's a distraction. That shouldn't be there. And I think luckily because of the dark bit in that corner anyway, if it had been really bright white in that corner, would have stood out more. But I did not dawn on me. I did not see that. So I went to MARS, which is the Mid-Atlantic Regional School of Photography, last year. It's the first week in May in Dewey Beach every year, and my teacher was Louis Kemper, who is a very well-known landscape photographer who actually worked for the Ansel Adams Gallery out in Yosemite. He suggested that you do an X. So what he does is he starts at the upper left-hand corner and kind of goes counterclockwise to make sure you don't have something distracting in your edges, because that can be really, it will make your photograph not as good. And then he makes an X across the middle just to kind of, again, make sure you're double checking those areas. Don't hesitate to move something. If it's a piece of trash, I have moved tree limbs. I have with me, and I didn't pull it out, but I have, I brought a weapon with me. Don't tell anybody. I take this with me. I got this off of Amazon, and I can cut. I'm serious. I've cut going through like brambles to get through to something, or you just got this one little stalk of something, and you go snip, and it's no longer in your photo, and you don't have to worry about using Photoshop to erase it out. Feel free to do that. Man, don't go around destroying nature, but it's fine to do that. If you can't, snip or whatever, you have 2 feet. Move a little to the right, move a little to the left, move forward. You can change your position to maybe get it out of your composition. If you're working with a zoom lens, like mine's a 14 to 35, at 14 it may be in my picture, but if I go down to maybe 20, it isn't. So those are your options. You can move yourself, you can zoom in or zoom out, depending on what you need to do, or cut it out of your photo physically, or move it, but don't hesitate. I'm not saying go ahead and rearrange everything, but if there is a stick there that is not adding to the photo, or I couldn't physically move that log that I've circled, but I certainly could have moved my position, or I could have zoomed in and composed it differently so that it was no longer in there. So there's my confession.
You wouldn't have considered cropping it?
I could have done that too, but I try to do things, if you can do stuff in camera. But yeah, no, I didn't even see it till just recently.
I honestly don't think it's distracting, which is why you didn't see it.
Exactly.
It could be.
It took
It
2
could,
years to be
the
distracted.
angle matches some of the trees. It could be left in there. I don't see where it's such a hindrance, and I'm just being honest.
Okay, well.
And the color doesn't mess it up. It looks kind of natural.
I think your eyes don't go to that corner. They,
No.
Nope.
No, if you didn't have that red circle,
Right.
Yeah.
Well, you might not have seen it like I didn't for a couple of years. I was.
now I'm going to be seeing it for
Well,
forever.
that's the idea, is to kind of make you stop and think. Because this is my confession that I didn't. And if I had gone back now, I see stuff a lot better than when I first took this. Because I took this several years ago. But I still love this photograph. This is Pretty Boy, by the way. That's the dam. That's the water coming over the dam. And these two guys came past me. They were hiking. I was photographing the river and the patterns in the water coming over, and it was a really overcast day. And these guys started to go up the trail that goes up the side there. And just as they did that, the sun broke through and lit up that part over there that looks a little warmer. Mm-hmm. Because before that, it had been a very cold picture because it was a very overcast day. So, I was like, oh my gosh, I have to. And then to leave the stupid stick in.
Beth, where are the horizontal lines? I don't get that.
That is the
That's part
dam,
of the
that's the dam.
That's the dam, yeah.
That's the zigzaggy water is coming over the dam, but those lines in it are the actual
Oh,
dam.
okay.
It almost looked to me like a forest in the
Yeah,
back
that's-
through the mist.
Uh-huh.
Somebody
You know,
said to
I-
me it looks like a Japanese line painting too,
Mhm.
that they thought with the
Yeah,
ziggy zaggy.
maybe.
But yeah, I just love the pattern of the water.
That's-
Two of my
that's pretty
favorite
wild.
places to shoot the backs of is the back of Pretty Boy and the back of Liberty. Back of Liberty is hard because it rarely flows over. Pretty Boy does quite often.
Quite often, yeah.
Yeah, and Lock Raven more so than anywhere.
Where were you standing when you took that? Were you on the
I was
stairs?
down. No, I was down at the river.
Bottom?
At the river bottom, yeah.
Never been there.
Yeah, it's
I'm trying to think where
It's-
that is, cause I was just there.
yeah. Well, if you park up where the dam is well, depending on which direction you're coming from,
Right.
there's parking on both sides. But there's stairs that go down.
Right.
Go further down. There's a little gap in the, or you can take the long route around. But it's steep.
Yeah. it is.
And I would only do it in the winter or fall time because I would not want to meet any little slithery friends, which I'm sure live there this time of year. I tend to do a lot more of my off trail stuff in the winter so that I have less critters I run into. So during the summer. But go ahead to the next one. This is another example of I could have cropped that out, but I wanted to leave this in here to give you an example. Look for bright spots that don't add to your photo, especially if they're in corners, because that can pull your eye away from the subject. That's our little rabbit who lives out front in our forsythia bush. And that's the road, believe it or not, that little white bit up there. But yes, to answer, I know you're going to ask me, could I have cropped it? Yes, I could have. But if I could have composed it differently, then I don't have to crop it. But I thought I'll use this as an example of what not to do instead of what to do.
And so often the tendency is to look at your so-called main subject and say, "Oh, that's
Yeah,
that's
got him,
great,"
I got him. Yeah.
and then not notice anything else. Now,
Right.
you know, the bunny would move quickly,
Right.
and you may not have time.
True. But so in that case, I would probably crop it out. But
Yeah.
if you can with landscape that isn't animals, because things generally aren't moving, you can take your time. And that's a nice thing about landscape is I love to do birding photography as well, but it's a whole different game. Birding is nothing like landscaping, and I pray that I get the shots because they move so fast. Okay, next one. And this would say, other things to consider is perspective. 3 guesses where this is. Does anybody know?
Have it agree?
Yes, how did you know? Yes, I'm up in Haverty Grace a lot. I have a Zillow alert for every time the house goes up for sale up there one of these days. But point is, consider a different perspective. Get down low. I know sometimes that's easier said than done. Or, change where you're standing. Even if it's just a few inches or a few feet, it can really change the perspective or the look of the photograph. Go to the left, go to the right. One of the things that I've always heard in photography is make sure you look down. Because a lot of us are used to looking at eye level and looking out this way. You can get reflections. You can find things like your leading lines, like a trail or a path or whatever, can be right there in front of you if you look down. I'll give you a perfect example of another thing. Look behind you. If you're doing a sunrise or even a sunset, sometimes the color can actually be better behind where the sun is. I had an example. I was in Rehoboth shooting sunrise. And it was one of those where the rain was kind of coming, but it was still sunny enough. And I turned around to get something out of my camera bag, and behind me, the boardwalk, beautiful rainbow. I was like, oh, and if I hadn't have turned around, I would have missed that. So kind of remember that you can do low, high, whatever, for a different perspective. Go ahead to the next one. And this is at Longwood Gardens, and I was shooting up. I love the gazebos there, but I decided to shoot up through the gazebo instead of the gazebo, it's, the main full structure. This is just standing right in the middle of the gazebo and shooting up through it, because the ironwork is really kind of cool too. And next one. and this is at Chanticleer, and this is a reflecting pool, but I got down to about the level of this table and shot this. If I had shot it where I was standing, it wouldn't have looked as nice. And the symmetry of the opening and the reflections of the two trees, even though they're not exactly, but you know, it works. And if I had taken it from a standing position, I wouldn't have gotten the reflection as well, and I wouldn't have gotten, you know, that's just a very different perspective than when you're doing, what is it, somebody once told me, 6 and 6, 6 feet tall and 6 feet away, move around a little. You know, and again, like I said, just moving a couple of inches or a couple of feet can make all the difference in the world. So next, some more kind of low shots, and again, using my leading lines. This was Loch Raven on the left during our drought last year, and that island you could actually walk out to, and there is house remnants there. There are the remains of one of the houses of the town of Warren before it went, not Warren, is it Warren?
Yes.
Yes, Warren, before it got put underwater. I would love to do that at Liberty, because there's a town of Oakland in Liberty, or underneath Liberty somewhere. And the one on the right is the Thomas Hayden Bridge in Havre de Grace. But again, to get that reflection, I had to get down low. If I had stood up here, I would not have gotten the same kind of reflection. So just changing where you're standing or your perspective on some things. Okay.
And that would be wide angle on the right. Well, probably both. Right?
Yeah. They were both, but they were in portrait. You know, I turned the wide angle, but I turned the camera in a more of a portrait aspect versus holding it, you know, in the landscape. Okay. Okay, this is one of the things I was talking about, said we bring around, is keeping your horizons straight. And I know somebody else who said it's really apparent if your horizons aren't straight. And this is the Pride going out, leaving last year from Havre de Grace. One of these days I'm going to get her with her plume and sails up. Every time I've gone, the wind has either been non-existent or last Friday was working against her. She had a great headwind. If she had been coming down the Susquehanna, she would have had her sails up, but she was coming up the Susquehanna. But anyway, keeping your horizon straight. And so Gary was mentioning, see if you can figure out how to get that grid pattern in your viewfinder, because if you don't have a level, if you have a level in your camera, and I'm going to show you something else you can use in a second, the level's better. But if you don't have that level built into your camera, if you can get the grid lines, you can use that to help you keep your horizons straight, because it does make a difference. And next one. This is Sachs Covered Bridge up near Gettysburg. And believe it or not, this is a drone shot. I was quite happy with this shot, but I liked the light, the drama in the sky, and the reflection of the bridge. And there's this little, it's not really a dam. I mean, I guess it is, because it kind of keeps the water in, but the water was overflowing to the right, which you can't see, which is off to this picture. But I took this with my drone. I was able to, again, change my perspective. Because I was using a drone, I was able to get close enough and low enough. Where I was standing with my camera on a tripod, I would not have gotten this shot. But I was able to get this shot by using my drone. Not saying that everybody has to to get a drone, but it's just basically keeping your horizon straight and changing your perspective. And next one. And this is Longwood Gardens, and so even though there's not really a horizon, you know, per se, as there's no sun setting or anything, trying to keep things straight and using your leading lines to accent and help you lead your eye through. This was up at Christmas time, and they did a spectacular job this year, I think even better than last year. Or I should say last year versus the year before that. They haven't done it yet this year.
Gorgeous.
Thank you. And then the last one is a friend of mine. This is also Pretty Boy. This is Gunpowder. This is the dams behind me. I'm shooting downriver, down Gunpowder Falls. Said to me, the thing that's missing in photography today is the narrative.
That's right.
Do you know what he meant by that?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
tell us, it has to tell a story
Yeah.
of some type,
Yeah, a lot of times we take just a pretty picture
right?
with no substance. So the old saying, photograph what you feel, not what you see. Especially important with landscape. So what's the first word that would come to mind when you look at this?
Cold.
Cold.
Okay.
Burr.
Yeah. Well, some people would see the water.
Right.
Some are going to see the snow-covered, sizes in the forest, and some would even see the dark, scary mystery of that water because that water is very dark. So it depends on what you're trying to bring out. What is the story or the narrative that you're trying to tell? So once you know how you feel, that will give you a clue on how to photograph the picture. So find your narrative is what Al would say. And then I wanted to show you just some of the gear I use, just because I can help.
Quick question on this. You were in the water, right?
Yes.
What was your gear on your feet?
I
Rubber
have
boots
hip
of some
waders.
sort? Hip waders.
Do you have your trout rod with you?
No, I don't fish, but I'm finding all these great places so that when my brother-in-law, who is in England, comes over, he can go trout
That's a
fishing.
world-class
Mhm,
stretch
mhm.
of river down there.
I know, I've seen many guys down there. So, your number one, yes, sir.
If you would turn on the light,
I
Yes.
get it.
I am gonna get the iPhone view of this. Hold on.
Oh, while you're doing that, can I ask you to hand me my camera bag? It's behind Gary.
I have a question.
Sure.
Your estimate percentage
Uh-huh.
of all the photos that we've seen this afternoon, how many were enhanced at home on the computer?
All my photos are.
Okay,
Because I shoot raw, it's not a photograph until
okay,
you,
I agree.
Edit.
I agree.
Until you,
Just to make
not a photograph until you didn't,
until you edit.
okay.
Yeah, because a raw file is very flat. It has all the data, but it doesn't become. I don't think of it because I think photography is art. It doesn't become the art piece until you've Finished it.
Finished it.
exactly. So this was what I was talking about earlier. It goes with my tripod. Your tripod will be your best friend, and you can get really lightweight ones. Don't get too lightweight because they won't be sturdy enough, and you've got your gear on it. But something like this, I think it was less than $50 off of Amazon.
Mhm.
Newer. I have more expensive tripods. I have a waterproof tripod. But then again, that's because it's what I love to do. I love a lot of water photos. Do a lot of waterfalls. They usually come with a carrying bag. You can put it in the side pocket of a camera bag, so it sticks there. I also have the ability on this camera bag to put it at the bottom. I don't have the straps on there now, but the straps would strap it to the bottom of the camera bag, make it easier. This is called a Small Rig, is the company, and it just fits on my camera. Let me take the lens off real quick. And I'm not going to screw it on, but it has the foot. You see the bottom. It has the foot, and then the foot goes in. I'll take that off. The foot goes in the tripod. It helps if I do it the right direction. And then it just snaps. It just snaps in. There we go. And then I lock it. And so
Is that ring going around and clamping the lens?
it clamps. It clamps like that. You put the lens inside it.
Okay,
And so then what I can do is the reason why I got this is because every time I would want to change my perspective and do, say, a portrait
yeah,
side, I was having to readjust and make sure everything is straight and line. But this rotates. See, so your camera's sitting here, and then it rotates back, and you can lock it into place. So I can lock it, and it's not going to go anywhere. I can unlock it and move it,
Yeah.
so that you can change.
So how's
that's
that
just for-
different than
yeah, that's
moving the
just
balls
for
down
rotation.
into the notch?
Yeah, I got it.
Because I don't have to move the ball. because I still I can move the ball.
When you move the ball, it's gonna change the perspective of the center of the lens. It's
Right.
Now the center of
But
the
now,
lens.
because I've got this, I just have to do this or that, and I don't
Okay,
have to
I
mess
see.
with the ball.
I see.
Yeah. Wide angle as wide as possible, especially for landscape. I have a 14 to 35. I have a 24 to 105 as well. Because sometimes I find, 'cause I love sky. I love the drama in the sky with clouds. So I love the aberration that this gives with that really wide angle. But definitely you want to make sure that you have something smaller than, like, say, a 50. 52. You need something bigger, I should say, sorry. Smaller in number, but bigger in width. This is something you can get on Amazon if you don't have the grid line or the level. These things, they slide into the shoe on your camera, and you've got a bubble level that'll tell you whether you've got your tripod level or whether you're holding it level. So you can use the level there and you can use the level here. And these things are, I don't know, I think a 3-pack was less than $10, you know. Wireless or even wired remote. If you're doing, again, doesn't have to cost a whole lot. This is a Bluetooth one. It syncs with my camera. I can set up what I want, and then I can just press it without having, especially if you've got it low. Like, I know some of us have back issues. So if you've got your tripod set up low, instead of staying down here trying to shoot, you can line up the shot and then stand up here and press the button, save your back. I love this for that. If you're out either early in the morning or late at night, and even if you don't need it to set up, a headlamp for getting back to the car, you know, depending on where you've gone. Even like when I have done like the sunsets at Loch Raven, which you can park kind of like right there, walking over some of that terrain to get back to the car, you don't want to trip, especially when you're holding gear. I know Gary mentioned that get out and shoot. Bad weather can be your best friend. I know nobody wants to, you know, ruin their camera equipment, but get like a umbrella for your, or not umbrella, but a hoodie for your camera. It goes over the lens, and some of them have it so that you can really cover it, and you just put your hands behind it. And I'm not doing this quickly, but I can do that, look through, and I've kept my gear, you know, and use your lens hood. If you're out and it's misty, like the other day I was up at Miller's Farm in Harford County, and I was doing the red clover. Misty, drizzly day, some great shots because everything was all covered with like the rain and dew and water, but I didn't want my lens to get wet. Put your lens hood on, and then you can use something like this to cover it. Or, I love this, again, this was cheap. Amazon, again, it fits in your shoe. Yeah, little umbrella. And then you just tighten it up.
I'm trying to figure out how to use that for a flash bounce or something.
Yeah.
Now I know.
Now you know. So, and then, you know, I can stand there and it covers, and you also can adjust it so that if I like want to go portrait,
Probably put my eye out.
this moves around. So if I am, I don't want it to go that way, but if I'm going to go shoot like that, I can do that. Again, that was really, didn't cost a whole lot of money. One thing I would highly recommend is polarizer, circular polarizer filter. Again, you don't have to go really expensive on those. Another one that I love, and I have several of these, are ND filters. If you're doing anything with long exposure, must have.
And what does that do?
Neutral density filter.
okay.
It cuts out even more light. It's not like a polarizer. It really cuts out light. And it depends on how many stops like you have. Like I have one here. But if you're doing any kind of nighttime photography too, it also helps. I've got one. Let's see. I've got a 2 to 40 I've got an 8 and a 15 stop. So it depends on what stops you want and what you're looking for. When we were doing the class at Mars, we did the 15 stop ND filter and went down and shot the Indian River Bridge at night. And we were doing intentional camera movement. And by cutting out the light and it makes your exposure have to be even slower. So again, you're going to be doing that on a tripod. But that's really cool if you're going to do anything with like smoothing water, if you're doing waterfalls, if you want to do, just if you're out on a day and it's really bright blue, it can help a whole lot better than just a polarizer. Polarizer is a must, but definitely if you're going to do anything with long exposure, your ND filter.
The polarizer, is that 1 or 2 stops? What do they use?
See, I don't know that they're stops, but they're
mean-
adjustable. So I don't know if you can see how my ring turns. So
Mhm.
when-
Yeah,
when- so
yeah,
when you
I have one, I just haven't used it enough to,
let's see, it's on the front.
One
I
I
think
have
that
does not change the,
I don't think it's a
by
stop.
more than maybe a third.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's
really?
more.
It's
It's
not that
more
much?
it's just more about cutting down glare. So like waterfalls is great for that because it cuts down the glare on the rocks and things. It's not going to you're not going to get as long an exposure with a polarizer as you would with an ND filter if you're doing like waterfalls. But definitely if you're out near water or a really bright sunny day. I know the other day or even sometimes the overcast days, I have gone and when I went to like Ladue, I would put the polarizer on the end of it just because it would help cut that glare and I wouldn't blow my highlights out as much, which is one of my bugaboos. So that's it. You can stop filming now. So that's. Any other questions or thoughts, comments?
Thank you.
yeah, that was excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
What range of ND filters do you have?
This one that I have from my big lens, or my landscape lens, is. You're asking me questions I don't have memorized. This one is what? This is a 10 stop.
10 stop.
And the biggest one I have is a 15 stop.
15, that's a lot.
Yeah.
You can
That's-
also get an adjustable
Right.
neutral density filter.
Neutral density.
Yeah,
They're
like this
expensive.
Wonderful.
This one's a 2 to 400.
So I
So
have,
that would be, I'm sorry.
I have a 2-stop one.
Yeah.
I've used it in snowy days when there's a lot of glare
Mm-hmm.
coming back off of the snow. It helps a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just bought the 2-stop, but for the solar eclipse
Mhm.
stuff, you would do the super.
Probably, I think they even had specialized filters for the Eclipse. I don't know that even an ND
You
would
don't
be
use
enough.
that too often, though. It's
Yeah,
It's not
that's
working.
only for the real serious. And I'm not as into like astrophotography and stuff like that, but I know some people like to do night photography. It's for me, it's more. And cheapest piece of equipment you can get. Everybody's got a dish towel at home, right? It's raining. I have a photo that I took of my photography mentor when we were shooting the Gloria, the tall ship Gloria that came in as excuse my French, as my husband would say, pissing down with rain. He's British, he gets away with it. We were at Fort McHenry, and he was there, Mr. Professional, for photojournalist for like 30 years and all this. He's out there with a towel over his camera. So, yeah, and it worked, So it doesn't always have to be that you're buying expensive equipment. You can definitely use things like this. This thing, again, cheapy on Amazon. It was a 2-pack. I love this. You want to sit down to take a photo because maybe you're shooting down somewhere. Like I was at Swallow Falls up in Deep Creek, and I was on the side. Well, the falls are on one side. I was on the trail on the other side, and I was shooting down, but I couldn't get all the way down to the bottom. I'm like, well, I'm going to sit on this rock, but the rock was wet. I'm like, I don't want to get wet. I've also used this to kneel on. Saved your knees. Maybe not in your case, but it saves your knees definitely. So your gear isn't always about the lenses.
That's right.
Yeah. So all that kind of good stuff.
Beth, my takeaway here is that to capture some of the photos, or many of the photos that I've seen today, it's a very deliberate process. It can be slow.
Yes.
It can be
Or it should.
trying.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, and that's something that a lot of people don't have.
Yes,
The patience for that.
I didn't when I first got into it.
And the other thing that I love all your photos,
Well, thank you.
and I can appreciate the effort that you put in. But you mentioned sunrise. You know, after I've retired, I hardly ever see sunrise. You know, and
You're missing. I have a page on my website dedicated strictly to sunrises and sunsets, and I have very few sunsets.
See, I'm the opposite. I see the sunrise, but I don't see any sunsets.
Yeah.
I'm early to
But
bed.
you can, yeah, same, so am I. But you can, I don't know, do you know who David Blackman is in Annapolis?
I know the name.
Okay. I'm part of his photography group too, and we were going to shoot at Delaware Botanic Gardens, and I said, oh, that's great. I said, I'll get there early and shoot the sunrise at a beach up the road from there.
Sometimes you
I had to get up at 3:30. He thought I was insane.
I know what I used to do.
Because it was like it was a 2.5 hour drive to Delaware, that part of Delaware that I wanted to be, and to get, of course, I got there. Oh, that
Excellent.
reminds me, I have a handout somewhere of, these are, the top
I've never
two
seen the folding.
are apps or websites
I mean, I have.
that you
I
can
figured
use.
the big Bowie knife coming out.
Knowing about the location and timing of the sun is important, whether you're doing sunrise or sunset. And these are apps that I use, or they're websites equivalents if you don't want to use an app. And then, of course, knowing the weather. And with all that, I will still say that even though I use all these things, and my favorites are things like Photographer's Ephemeris, My Sunset, Alpenglow, and Clear Outside. That'll give me an idea of whether I'm going to have a good sunrise or sunset, and they are not infallible. I can't tell you how many times. The other day I was supposed to shoot the Pride. 74% chance of a beautiful sunrise. Hour up to Happy to Grace, 100% cloud cover. If there was a sunrise, I never saw it. But it's good to have these on your phone or whatever. And then, of course, these are just some of my favorite weather apps. I also happen to be a bit of a weather nerd. My father was a weatherman on his Navy boat, plus he worked for the National Weather Service before he moved over to Westinghouse. So I come by it honestly. And just some reminders about the things you need to do for composition to make your subject heroic. And these are just a few of the compositional guidelines you can use. It's not like the only ones you can use, but these are kind of the ones that help the most. And then my reminders are, check your distractions, keep your horizon straight, try a different perspective, and of course find your narrative or your story. So, and I can give you the extra copies if people, I can give you the digital file if you want that too.
I can scan that.
Okay.
Couple other things too. I've talked about anticipation and whether or not it's a speeding car or a portrait or whatever. And so often people are surprised about some movement going on or an expression coming up. And if you think about it, you know what's going to happen. You know that the car's coming around the corner. Somebody's reaction to something. Sunrise, sunset. You know what you have to do. The difference between nautical sunrise or sunset and what are the others? We have a Fisher guy here still.
Well, I can tell you it's on the apps on my phone, but my phone's over there.
There's a maritime, you can
Yeah,
use
there's maritime,
maritime, twilight.
Twilight.
Right, twilight, what does that mean? And so on, that's useful to know. What was the other brilliant thing that you said that I was going to respond to? Let's see. I'll come back to it.
Okay. I said, so many bullet.
Yeah, I have to sort through them all.
I said a lot of stuff you guys already know. Sometimes you just need to hear it in a different way. You know? Sure.
Has anybody gone out and with a tripod and say, okay, I'm going to take all these pictures for the next hour or whatever on the tripod? I'm not going to just move the camera around. I think people would find it's going to slow you down. You're going to think more.
Yeah.
And then you set it up, you can compose, you can adjust rather than up, down, up, down, that sort of thing.
Yeah, definitely
You don't
tripod
take your
helps.
wife.
Yeah.
And don't take your spouse, yes.
I've
Or if you do,
played
leave them
around
far
with,
enough.
played around with that and perspective, higher and lower. I personally, and Steve has the same camera, I believe we have maybe a little bit of a detriment. We don't have, well, we do have the screen in the back, but it's, I guess they call it live view.
Yeah,
I would much prefer to have a screen that you can flip up at an angle that if you're, put the
Nikon.
camera down low and
Right.
you can look down and see it. For now, we'd have to lay flat on the ground to use that. So,
It's a solution.
I know what it is.
New camera.
Right.
Yes, oh, what, I
I can't
like the
justify it.
viewfinder, but I do, when I get on tripod, I do tend, and I have the ability to flip out.
Yeah.
It makes a world of difference, so whether I'm holding it this way,
Absolutely.
you know, doing it that way, yeah. And Nikon has got the ability, theirs folds out, I think.
Folds.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
it folds
folds
up
up.
and out.
Yeah,
So-
right. So theirs is even a little different. This is Canon. Theirs is a little different.
So that's why I don't have any good landscape photos.
That's
my
his
camera's
excuse.
fault.
Yeah, but
Oh, I
my-
see. No, a photographer never blames the camera.
My solution for that though is to zoom out a little bit so that you can straighten it, and I'll hold the camera down here and take a number of different shots and then look at
Maybe
them
you'll get
and,
one.
Yeah, that's
Well-
a good thing about digital is you can shoot and
That's,
then look.
that's when this would come in handy, because you can set up,
Yeah, right.
and some of the tripods, like this one, you have, if you have a center stalk on this,
Yeah,
like I
turn
do,
upside down.
you can turn it, you can
Yep.
invert it so that the
Right.
camera's hanging down
Yeah.
here. And again, even if it's wired, which are really cheap,
Yeah.
you know, you can, it'll save your back, and then you could get a different perspective, or, you know, get that shot that you wanted, but you can't because your screen doesn't flip.
And
So
it's
simple
small,
fixes
it
like
just
that.
sticks in
Yeah,
there.
exactly.
So Steve, what you're talking about is a reverse Hail Mary. Rather than this.
that's right.
It's not right.
That's right.
If people have 10, 15 minutes, we can go through people's landscape pictures before the education. Yeah,
I'm coming back.
Yeah.
10 or 15?
You guys saw all of mine, now we get to look at yours.
After seeing yours, I want to
Yeah,
take
really,
mine,
I'm
gonna
not
take
so
mine out
sure I
of
want
this.
to
Oh,
look at
stop,
mine.
stop.
I've shown you mine, show me yours.
That's all right.